everybody. This is a continuation of Chapter 6. The other video that's only about 14 minutes long got cut off, so I was going through the quiz. And now I'm picking it up again. We got through, I believe, just a portion of the quiz. So I'm going to do a quick summary of the quiz and then jump into Chapter 6. Slides. And here we go. Alright, so for the quiz you'll want to know what the ERISA Act is, E-R-I-S-A. You'll also want to know what cost shifting is, know what co-insurance is, what a premium is, what a deductible is, what first dollar coverage is, know what the RAND health insurance experiment was all about, know what Medigap insurance is. I guess in that sense you'll also want to know what an HMO is, and the difference between an HMO and Medigap and Medicare and Medicaid. Know what can be covered under the Affordable Care Act, especially if you're a minor. That was a big portion of that plan. Know what a pre-existing medical condition is. Know what an exchange is, an Affordable Care Act exchange. Know what that is. And what purpose do they serve. Know what a bronze, silver, gold, and platinum health plan is, at least in the eyes of the government. Know the difference, at least is what the government believes is a large employer versus a small employer. Know what the subsidy levels are for the Affordable Care Act, or what they were. It's actually in change right now in 2018. Know who is covered by Medicare, who is covered by Medicaid, and know the main function of the Medicare Payment Advisory Committee, which is MedPAC. Let's see. Know the difference between Medicare Part A, Part B, Part C, and Part D. In general, know what the general benefit of Medicare is. Let's see, know what an SMI is, capital S, capital M, capital I. That has to do with Medicare as well. Know the difference between Champus, TRICARE, the VA, know what they are. If you hear breathing in the background, my dog is right down there and she's chewing on a toy, so she's not always the quietest, so you may see or hear her. Know what fee-for-service is. Know what bundled services are. Know what a resource-based relative value unit is, or an RVU. Know what capitation is, what a bundled fee is. Know what did I say that? What capitation is. Know the difference between prospective reimbursement and retrospective reimbursement is. Know what a DRG is, diagnostic related group, diagnosis related group, and then also know what an MSDRG is. Have an understanding of what case mix is and how that works. Know what the Medicare minimum data set is. We've talked about gross domestic product and gross national product, but definitely know what the GDP is, gross domestic product. Know what adverse selection is. Alright, so that's the quiz. Alright, we'll jump into the slides, and I have to grab my packet. I'm going to change it so you can see the slides on the screen, and that'll make me look darker, but I don't know how to fix that, so I'm going to give it a shot. So now you have Dark Me, but then you have the slides as well. So we're on chapter 6. Long and the short of it is, chapter 6 is about health service financing, and the reason why we call it health service financing is that insurance, at least what we call insurance or health benefit plans, has really turned into a healthcare financing mechanism. We'll talk about what insurance actually is, or what it should be, which is it's protection. It's insurance is meant to protect you or me against the risk of something really bad happening. Health insurance, as we call it, as it's attached through our employers and whatnot, is it isn't really that. It's a health benefit, not health insurance. And we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about the complexities of it as well. So here, we'll just drive in. All right. Part of the reason why we need financing mechanisms in healthcare today for benefit coverage is because it's extremely complex. There are many, many private plans. We have Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United, that kind of stuff. Plus, the government has gotten into the business too, so we have different kinds of coverage from them too: Medicare, Medicaid. Here in Wisconsin, we have waiver-based programs like family care, community care, family care partnership, PACE, things like that. So we've got lots of private plans, lots of government plans, many different ways to pay for it. But the basics around it is that financing is needed to take care of health premiums. And if you think about it, very few people have the ability to just go out and write a check for a house, so they get a mortgage or a loan. They have to come up with a down payment and all sorts of different things, and that's an example of financing a purchase. And health insurance has gotten to the point where the premiums have gotten so expensive and coverage has gotten so expensive that we, the consumers, are not able to pay for it out of our own pockets completely. And it's not uncommon, right, that employers cover a large portion of the health premium. And we'll talk about what premiums are and deductibles are and things like that. But so in our country, health insurance companies, private health insurance companies, are still the majority stakeholder in how we private citizens get access to health care benefits. And it's gotten so expensive, we need to finance it. The Affordable Care Act has played a big role in the uninsured. The whole goal of the Affordable Care Act was to reduce the number of uninsured in our country, which it did. But what we don't talk about much is that a whole lot of people lost their insurance under the Affordable Care Act as well. We'll talk about that. In general, health insurance, though, as a benefit, is meant to lower the immediate out-of-pocket expense for you or for me when we access those health care benefits. Financing, demand, we've talked about in the past, demand side rationing and supply side rationing. Financing in healthcare or health insurance. Hang on a sec. Here, I'm just going to go back here. Financing affects health insurance and the supply of healthcare because in order to build a new hospital or get a new machine or something like that, again, much like a house, organizations aren't able to just go out and write a check for it, so they have to get a loan or get financing for it. That then has an effect on their ability. Whether they get the loan or not will determine whether or not they build the hospital or get the machine. That is the supply. So if you're able to get the loan to build the hospital, basically you're able to increase the supply of services in a market. If you can't get the loan, you don't build the hospital, and that increased supply is not available. So that's an example of supply side rationing. Financing is a supply side rationing tool. I hope that makes sense. When a hospital or an organization of doctors or whoever is able to get financing for a new service or a new building, services proliferate. Think about it. If I often think of it as Field of Dreams. I know I'm dating myself, but If You Build It, They Will Come, the baseball movie. If someone's going to go through the trouble of building a hospital or building an outpatient center or getting a new machine, by gosh, that thing is not going to sit idle. Someone is going to make sure that it gets used. And therefore, if you get financing, you build this thing, someone's responsible for making sure it's getting used. Those services will proliferate. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Because of financing, many new divisions and subdivisions of healthcare and healthcare administration has actually been developed. There's a whole area of healthcare administration devoted to healthcare financing. There are bankers, there's lawyers, there's suppliers. It's not just doctors, nurses, and buildings and things like that. It's a huge industry, which is part of the reason why it's so expensive and complex. So, so I guess we'll say that. So cost controls. So that's from the hospital side and the provider side. But the same thing, think of financing and a person's ability to have a health benefit, insurance, so to speak. That also drives the provision of services. If I have health insurance coverage, let's say I'm thinking I'm going to get my nose fixed. I don't know if you can tell, but it's kind of bent. I've broken it a few times. If I had health insurance, which I do, but if I had health insurance, or if I really wanted to get it fixed, and if I, let's say I went into a plastic surgeon, my primary care doc said, yep, gives me a referral to a plastic surgeon to fix my nose. And then let's say the doc says, yes, it's medically necessary for you to fix your nose because of breathing problems or something like that. And insurance is going to cover it, I might get the service. So if I would go in and let's say I didn't have insurance or insurance wouldn't cover it, and let's say the surgery would cost me $18,000. I'm telling you, I'm kind of a frugal guy. I wouldn't spend $18,000 to fix the schnoz. But if I've met my deductible for the year, and I have a few $100 copayment, and insurance will cover the vast majority of the cost of it, so it doesn't feel like the $18,000 is coming out of my pocket, I might get the service. And that's where the expansion of health insurance and health insurance programs, if there's insurance coverage, one sees an increase in the provision of services to the newly covered population. And that's actually what happened to the Affordable Care Act. The expectation was a lot of people would start to get coverage and they wouldn't use it right away. So especially young people, young healthy people would start paying premiums. You're shoveling money into the bucket. Hopefully a lot more people putting money into the bucket through premiums and things like that for the few people that need to take the money out of the bucket to get health services covered. What happened with the Affordable Care Act is that a lot of young people opted to pay the penalty to the government through taxes, which I don't know if you knew that or not, but there's a penalty provision. said, I'm not gonna spend $300 a month or whatever through the exchange. So that's $300 a month. It's $3,600 a year. They opted to spend the $2,200 a year in the fine or the tax to not have any coverage, instead of, again, increasing the premium amount. Which then what happened is that people who really needed services and wanted services, once they had coverage, they went to the doctor and got a bunch of procedures done because they were sick and they needed it. And getting health insurance coverage, they made it affordable. So service provision went up. So, and then what that did is that drove health insurance companies who were like, holy cow, all these people who we thought were going to join and not use services didn't happen, so they don't get the benefit of having those premiums. Because a health insurance company, when you get health insurance, where you're paying a premium, that money's not going into the bank, a bank with your name on it, waiting for you to take it out. What it is it's going into this common pool of money, and the whole covered population then taps that pool or taps that bucket to take money out to cover whatever they need. And insurance, at least insurance plans or health benefit financing plans, only work if over time more people are putting money in than the number of people taking money out. That didn't happen with the Affordable Care Act right away. So if you want to reduce expenditures, you can reduce expenditures by restricting insurance, and that's called demand-side rationing. Remember how I talked about supply-side rationing? You increase financing. You have the ability to provide service, so the supply of services go up. Well, demand-side rationing is the same thing. It's like if you don't cover it with a health benefit, then people generally won't use the service. So you're restricting or lowering the demand for that service. So insurance or health benefit programs can be used as a demand-side rationing program too. Also, just reduce, if you reduce reimbursement, let's say it's covered, but it's not covered by enough to cover the actual cost of providing the service. Behavioral health, those of you that are behavioral health professionals, you probably know this even better than I do, but there might be some reimbursement out there, but it's not enough to cover treatments. Well, over time you just can't, if you can't cover your costs, or if one can't cover their costs, treatments won't be provided. So, because if you're losing $1 on every single procedure, you can't make it up in volume. You lose $1 on one procedure, not so bad. You do 5 procedures, you've lost $5. You do that over and over 1,000 times, 10,000 times, you're just losing money. And that won't work over time. Spending less on research and development. If you restrict research and development, new products, new services won't be developed, and therefore there won't be any demand for them. If you don't, if there's nothing to have demand for, you're not going to have demand at all. So now we'll talk a little bit about insurance and insurance function. Insurance protects against risk. That's the whole thing. Those of you that have car insurance or automobile insurance, and in Wisconsin there's a mandatory car insurance state where if you drive, you legally have to have at least coverage if you crash into someone and you hurt them or you wreck their car. You don't have to have coverage for your own car, but you have to have coverage for the other person. That's to protect other drivers on the risk. Doesn't mean they actually do, but technically it's the law that you're supposed to have it. But that's insurance's whole goal is to protect against risk. It's the possibility of something bad happening in the future. You're trying to avoid something bad. So that's, car insurance seems like a total waste of money until you're in an accident and you don't have the $10,000 to pay the other guy to fix his car. Then you have insurance. Then you're like, thank goodness I have insurance. The insurance as a business works best when the probability of something going wrong is small, because then the insurance company can collect those premiums, make some money off the premiums, things like that, but they don't necessarily have to pay out as much. So that's the goal. So here's some terms. The insured, that's the person that has the health benefit. That's like, I have car insurance, I'm the insured. I'm the protected one. The insurer is the agency. For me, it's American Family, could be Allstate, Progressive. That's the insurer. Underwriting is the function of someone evaluating the risk, my risk of getting into an accident. If my risk of getting into an accident is high, I may pay more. If it's low, I may pay less. That's underwriting. You have underwriters for mortgages and all sorts of different stuff too. There's a body of expertise there. They're called actuaries that work on that kind of stuff. They're sort of mathematical predictors. They create mathematical models to predict whether or not whatever you're insuring against or hoping will happen or won't happen will happen. So risk is unpredictable just by the nature of, well, risk. Where'd I go? Hang on. If for one individual, risk is very difficult to predict. 2, 3, 4 individuals, all of a sudden you're in a group, then risk is easier to predict because there's more numbers, there's more patterns, that's data. The computerization of everything has really helped with mathematical modeling and the ability to use mathematical models to predict like heart attacks or plane crashes or auto crashes has really become more sophisticated with the ability to process and crunch numbers, because group behavior is easier to predict than individual behavior, and that is a fundamental function of an insurance company's underwriting function. Insurance, and also that insurance or a health benefit transfers the risk from one person to a group of people. Remember I was talking about earlier where if there's a whole bunch of people shoveling money into the bucket through premiums, and then that premium pot is being tapped on for a bunch of other people, that's so that, let's say there's 10 of you out there putting money in, and then I'm the one that has a heart attack and I have to take money out, and all the other 9 of you didn't have a heart attack. Well, that risk of having a heart attack was transferred from all of you and then financially to me when I had it. So that's what insurance does. It pools the resources. It's like if you're going out for pizza, and like I say, it's a really big pizza, and this is a good example. Have you ever gone out when you're going out to eat and with a group of people, and let's say you only eat salad and drink water, but then at the end of the night, everybody says, "Hey, let's just split the bill evenly." But your buddy Stan over there, had had 3 beers, and his date Susie had 3 martinis, and you had a glass of water, and then you had a pizza. Should have been even, right? Pizza, everybody pizza. But they drank a lot, and you didn't. But if you split the bill among everybody, you pay more than what you used. Insurance is kind of that way. If it's working right, everybody's putting money in, but only a few people fully tap it. It doesn't seem fair in general, but when you're the one that needs it, or you're the one that wants it, so maybe not the martini, but the heart attack, then it's like, ooh, thank goodness we had that. And over time, the thought is that over time, everybody is going to need to pull money out of the pot. So maybe the next time you go out to eat, you're the one that had 2 martinis, and Gloria over there only had a salad and water, and then you benefited because she covered part of your meal and beverage when you split it equally. I don't know if that was a good example or not, but that's I wanted to use that as an example of pooling resource and shifting risk. So more terms. The beneficiary is the insured person. So when something happens, I'm driving down the road and I have insurance. Okay, I'm the insured. All of a sudden, Let's say someone hits me, or I hit someone, or I don't know, something bad happens. I hit a deer, and then I have to use my insurance. Then I become the beneficiary of the benefit, if that makes sense, or the beneficiary of the program, because then they'll ultimately cut a check to me to cover my costs. So that's that. The premium is the amount that's charged to the insurer just to have access to the benefit. I think of it as like a membership fee. So I actually have Blue Cross Blue Shield now, but so I pay premium every month to Blue Cross Blue Shield. That's my membership fee. My premium is my membership fee to be part of the Blue Cross Blue Shield family. I pay that no matter what, just to have access to the benefit, just to have access to the ability to transfer my personal risk to the big pool. And in most cases, the employer will cover a portion of that. So all of a sudden, it's me, the individual, but then also my employer putting money into the premium pot to spread the risk. Because now think about an employer, let's say it has 100 employees, and there's like a bunch of employers going through Blue Cross Blue Shield, all putting their employees' money into the pot. What we're all doing is transferring our risk from the individual to a larger and larger group, and that's again the purpose. So we talked about premium. That's the amount charged by insurers to insure against risk. Oh, risk rating. Risk rating is there's different kinds of risk rating. There's experience rating, community rating, and then adjusted community rating. Experience rating is where they look at a bunch of people, and let's say it's determined that let's say coal miners are at high risk for lung disease. So experience rating, there used to be a time when an insurance company would say, hey, you're all coal miners, we'll insure you, but your premiums are going to be more expensive, because the odds of you needing treatment for lung disease are much higher than, let's say, school teachers on the beach, fresh air, all that kind of stuff, not underground breathing coal dust. So experience rating, looking over time, saying that coal miners, high proportion of coal miners get lung disease. Based on that experience, we need to raise the premiums and the cost, is experience rating. Community rating is taking big groups of people, mixed, but big groups of people, where we take like the coal miners and the teachers and put them in one group. Maybe the coal mine is near the beach with the teachers, so you put them all into one group, and what you're doing then is rating the whole community, the group as a whole, so the risk for the group goes down, and then hopefully the premium price also goes down. Again, so the teachers are shoveling money into the premium pot, while knowing that the odds are that there are some coal miners that will take money out, have another martini, but maybe the teacher is married to a coal miner, and it's okay because, well, the whole family's covered then. And then there's adjusted community rating, which the Affordable Care Act required, and what it is a mathematical way to make that fair, make community rating fair. So it's a combination of experience rating and community rating. So just know that that was a way to try to make it more fair. So the deductible. So we talked about the premium. The premium is the membership fee, the amount you pay every month, and your employer pays every month. But then your deductible is the amount that, like me, the insured, I have to pay before the benefit kicks in. So on a car, it's like the $500 deductible on a car, $1,000 deductible on a car. Let's say you hit a deer, you've got to pay the first $500 before the insurance company covers the rest of it. That's your deductible. Same thing with health insurance. I'm dating myself, but many years ago, deductibles were relatively small. But now today, I think my family carries a $3,500 deductible. And I think this is a year we're actually getting close to it. It hasn't been a good year for the Frediani family, but it has been, but we've used our health insurance. my family has to pay that $3,500 before insurance will cover the rest. That's the deductible. There's also a copayment. Oh, and it's applied annually. Deductibles start over every year. So you use your deductible, you get to your deductible. Maybe if you get to your deductible by June, then all of a sudden you're having full insurance coverage for the rest of the month. Oops, sorry, my screen went off. Well, you know what? Maybe what I'll do is doesn't seem like you can see it anyway. So I'll just tell you what slide I'm on. So right now I'm slide 14. Your copayment is the flat amount you pay per service. So if you go to the doctor, if you've done that, you've got to pay that $10, $20, $30, $50, $40, whatever, just to get in, to get past the receptionist. That's the copayment. It's a flat amount for every time you access the service. And co-insurance is when the benefit, after you hit your deductible, and after you pay your copayment, because even if you go to the hospital, there's a copayment. After you hit your deductible, not all plans cover 100% above and beyond the deductible. For instance, like Medicare is an 80-20 plan, where an older adult, that's for Medicare. Medicare covers older adults. You pay your $385 of a deductible, and then Medicare will cover 80% of anything that happens beyond that. That's why there's Medigap insurance. So let's say you're an older adult and you've got a lot of chronic stuff going on, and maybe you're at risk for a stroke or a heart attack, or maybe a hip replacement or something like that. Medicare will only cover, after your deductible, 80% of that hip surgery. I don't know, I'm guessing, but I think a joint replacement may cost $20,000, $25,000. Let's call it $20,000. Insurance, or Medicare, will only cover 80% of that $20,000. So you get your hip replaced, the person's still on the hook for 20% of that, $4,000. You get Medigap insurance or supplemental insurance to help cover that additional amount. That's what that's for. So United Healthcare's AARP sponsored program is one of the most popular out there. And that's to cover that gap between what Medicare will pay and what is necessary. So moral hazard and cost sharing. Remember when I was telling you about my broken nose? If I have insurance, if I make my decision to get my nose fixed because I have insurance, because my cost is low enough that it's worth it, that's an example of a moral hazard, where someone will use services that might not necessarily be necessary, but they use them because there's healthcare coverage, because there's insurance benefit. That's a moral hazard. And the Rand Health Insurance Experiment, which is a quiz question, studied that. And what they came up with is that cost sharing has a big impact. If I've got skin in the game, if I have to cover a portion of it, this is part of the reason why co-payments have gone up so much. That we had to hang on a sec. Did you need something, bud? Okay. That co-payments go up. That it reduced the use of health insurance. That was my son. He stopped in to say hello, and my dog just took off. So cost sharing has material impact on lowering utilization without serious negative health effects. So I thought somewhere there's a magic number where people, and that's where actuaries come in, and actuaries and underwriting work together to figure out what's that magic number. What's the price that it's affordable enough so it's fair and reasonable if someone needs it, but it's high enough that people who don't necessarily need the service won't use it. I hope that makes sense. So now I'm on slide, looks like 16, where we're talking about insurance terminology. The benefits, those are the services covered. So surgery, all that kind of stuff. Towing, if it's car insurance, would be a benefit. Pardon me. It's always specified in the contract, so here's a public service announcement. Read the fine print. You gotta read the fine print. And for instance, like vision and dental is usually not covered as a health benefit in health insurance. But I'll give you, this is interesting. My daughter just had her wisdom teeth pulled out, and went to the dentist or endodontist, I guess technically, and they asked for both insurance cards, so health insurance and dental insurance cards. Well, so okay, I gave them to him, but then I don't know, 2 months later, I get an explanation of benefit in the mail that says the service wasn't covered. And I, being very rational and calm, I'm like, what the heck? Cost how much to get 4 teeth pulled? Oh my goodness. It was a pretty big bill. I thought it was a big bill. So I'm looking at it, and I look at it, and I see that, they submitted that to my health insurance company, but it's a dental procedure. So I call them up, and they said, oh, that's standard practice. They always attempt to tap a person's health insurance benefit under oral surgery for wisdom teeth before they go to the dental service benefit. Then I looked into it. It's like, that's interesting. Why would they do that? It's because oral surgery under the medical benefit for our insurance company pays the doctor more than what my dental insurance does. So they said, okay, Mr. Friediani, no problem. We'll resubmit under your dental insurance program. Haven't gotten a new or different explanation of benefit, but I'm hopeful that the bill will go down, because that was a lot of money. So that's what a benefit is. Group insurance. Why do we have group insurance? Well, other than just risk, pooling risk, which we already talked about, there's also big advantages for employers and things like that. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but at some point, under ERISA, the government, way back when, allowed employers, when employers provided health benefits or insurance to their employees, that's a qualified expense. Any money the employer puts toward a premium or something like that, they can deduct. They don't get taxed on it as income. So if you're a manufacturer and you make $100,000, that's taxable, because that's income above and beyond. It's corporate tax. If you spend $30,000 on health benefits for your employees, that reduces your taxable income by $30,000. So now all of a sudden it's $70,000 of taxable income because you took that deduction, which is a good thing for the organization, because less money's going, they believe it's a good thing because less money's going toward taxes. Now remember, this also comes after paying salaries and bonuses and stuff like that too. So it's lowering the effective tax rate for that employer. So that happened with employers a long time ago. In 1974, ERISA, this is a quiz question, E-R-I-S-A, ERISA shared that same tax benefit to organizations or groups who self-insured. So if you can identify yourself as a self-insured group, whether you're a corporation or not, that same tax benefit went where, so that you'd be able to write off the taxes on that. And then the Affordable Care Act, under ERISA also, as it was updated, if you're self-insured, the Affordable Care Act allowed certain restrictions under the Affordable Care Act to be released. This was Hobby Lobby large faith-based organizations took issue with that, with the Affordable Care Act, which mandated reproductive services, but these organizations said, well, under the original plan and under ERISA, it said if you're self-insured, you can choose what, to some extent, what benefit is covered. Under the Affordable Care Act, they said no, you had to include and cover those services, and that's why there was a big hubbubaloo over it. Just an aside, but that's where that came from. So now I'm on slide 18, types of private health insurance. There's individual private health insurance. So that's like you or me going to get insurance for ourselves where you're not part of a group. Now, technically though, what they do is they rate you and they put you in a group, but you don't have any control over it, as opposed to being part of your employer, which you're part of, you know, the 100 employees and you're automatically part of a group there. Premiums are based on, if it's an individual plan or a non-group plan, the premiums are based on your own experience and your own health and demographics. Under the Affordable Care Act, a lot of self-insured people lost access to that benefit because that's what the exchanges were for. Plans that were providing individual health benefits got rid of those plans and then directed people to go on to the exchange to get similar, or what was hoped to be better coverage. There's managed care plans. Initially they were different from commercial health insurance, but for all intents and purposes today, all commercial health plans are managed care plans. And the way that we know that is they restrict the physicians, the number of physicians, the type of physicians, you know, their panels, preferred providers and things like that. That used to be part of managed care and really rocked the world of everybody, but everything is managed care now. And the reason why we know that is that if you have health insurance or health benefit through your employer, you go online to see if your doctor's covered. If there used to be a time where all doctors were covered, but now you have if doctors are covered or not, if they're in the plan or not in the plan, and you know you're part of a managed care plan. Or if you have to go to your primary care doc before you go see a specialist, you're in a managed care plan. So what other kinds of types of private insurance are there? I'm on slide 19 now. There's a high deductible health plan or savings options, so the HRA. It's funded by the employer, so I, as an employer, can fund an HRA where I'm putting money in, pre-tax, so I'm not taxed on it, putting in to help finance the cost of health benefits for my employees. HDHP, that's letters used in the slides on slide 18, that's high deductible health plan. An HRA, health, I think it's health resource account if I remember correctly, an employer does not have to provide a high deductible health plan. It's optional. You can, but you don't have to. So I, as an employer, can put money in this HRA to cover employees, a portion of the employee's premium. So Blue Cross Blue Shield, they say, you know, for the premium is $1,000 a month. The employer will make the employee cover a portion of it, but then the employer can also put money into this other account to use across all the boards, so that it lowers that premium from $1,000, the realized premium from $1,000 to, let's say, $500 per person, so that everybody gets a benefit, and it reduces then the total premium cost, and hopefully the full cost of providing the benefit over time. I hope that makes sense. Then there's a health savings account, which you can have a health savings account, I can have a health savings account, employers can help set them up for us if they want, but the employer is not mandated to contribute toward it. It's optional. But if you have if an employer is doing it, in a health savings account, or people are using it, it's always attached to a high deductible health plan. and it's a financing mechanism in that money is taken out pre-tax, so tax-free money is put into this HSA, health savings account, for the purpose to help the insured meet the high deductible amount. So my deductible is $3,000 a year, let's say. The health savings account will take money out of my account, put it into a savings account over here, maybe $200 a month, so $2,400, so that there's a guarantee that at least $2,400 of the $3,000 deductible is being saved and there over time. So it's all out of pocket, but the realized out of pocket then is $600 in case I have to meet my deductible. So it reduces the risk of me not having enough money to use my health benefit if I really need it. That's a health savings account. Medigap we talked about, it's supplemental insurance. It's to cover the cost of the high out-of-pocket stuff when someone actually needs to use their Medicare benefit, let's say for an inpatient stay or something like that. It's part of that is what the original Medicare program was, because when Medicare came out, it was basically a Medigap insurance, right? Or almost everybody, when Medicare came out, almost everybody had a pension and was employed, and their employer provided them health benefits until they died. That's not the case anymore, but that's how it was when Medicare started. And Medicare was a gap insurance for those that were at that time, 62 and older when it first came out. That was additional insurance to cover the high cost of stuff that happened after they retired. Now it's an entitlement that covers people for 30 years, but that wasn't the original intent. Now there's Medicare Part A, Part B, and Part C. Part A covers inpatient services. Part B covers outpatient services. Part C is Medicare, basically Medicare Managed Care or Medicare Advantage program. You can't get Medigap insurance, like that United AARP plan, if you're signed up for a Medicare Part C plan. A little tricky there. And then D is prescriptions. So now I'm on slide 21. There's some trends in health insurance. In 2005, almost 92% of the population was covered by private health insurance through their employers. In 2011, that number dropped to 89%, which doesn't sound like a lot. But there's almost 400 million people in the United States. Well, back then there was a little less, 360 something million. But 3% or 4% of 360 million is a lot. So the figure dropped it. And in the book on figure 6-4, it shows the trend. But there's a drop, Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act did and was effective at increasing the number of insured people in the group. Now, another trend, though, that I don't know if it was expected or not, but fewer small businesses are offering health insurance because it's gotten so expensive. And then there was an option to direct people to the exchange. If you were an employer less than 50 people employed, you didn't have to offer coverage. And a lot of them didn't. They said, okay, thank you, no thank you. And they stopped providing health insurance coverage. Also, through the Affordable Care Act and things, remember, now that a lot more people were being insured, premiums started to go up. Employers found that they didn't want to or couldn't continue to afford and pay as much to cover premiums. So there were some employers that cover 100% of the premium cost for employees. All of a sudden now they're only covering 90%, 80%, 70%. This was really apparent with educators and teachers. If all of a sudden there wasn't enough money coming through to cover the increases, so people that historically hadn't covered a lot of their insurance premiums were now being asked to. And there was a lot of hullabaloo, at least in the Wisconsin area, the greater Milwaukee area, where teachers were saying, all of a sudden, we're losing our health benefits. Well, I heard that from several teachers, and actually at the university, we talked about it too. But that's not actually the case. Health and benefits weren't cut. Premium subsidies were cut. More cost sharing was being implemented, mostly for budgetary reasons, which then resulted in higher out-of-pocket costs for whoever was covered. So, all right, now I'm on slide 22, COBRA, C-O-B-R-A, 1985. COBRA is a law that mandates that if you have health insurance, health benefits through your employer, and then you leave employment, that you can still have access to that health benefit in general for up to 18 months after you left that job. Now the kicker is that you have access to it, but the employer doesn't have to subsidize the premium anymore. So remember my example where premiums were $1,000 a month and my employer maybe was covering 75% of that? Well, under COBRA, if I'm not employed with the business anymore, I have access to the same health plan, but I'm responsible for all $1,000 of the premium per month. Actually, technically, the employer can actually charge me a processing fee. So it can be up to 102% of the premium. So it might actually cost me $1,200 a month if the employer decides to charge me that extra 2%. And then, so that's 18 months after you separate from the job, you have access to the health benefit. If you're disabled, you have access up to 29 months. The goal is to not, so that people don't end up uninsured while they're looking for another job, because we're still in an environment where most everybody gets their health benefits through their employer. So it's 29 months for disabled folks. Family coverage for 36 months if the worker dies. So my family, I die, that'd be sad, but if I died, my family would have access to my health benefits for 36 months after I died. Pardon me. So the Affordable Care Act did not affect COBRA anyways. So other trends, the number of uninsured. So we talked about the uninsured dropped between 2005 and 2011. Or, I'm sorry, private insurance coverage dropped between 2005 and 2011. Between 2000 and 2009, the number of uninsured increased dramatically. That huge group of young people who didn't want health insurance, but all of a sudden were legally mandated and didn't sign up for insurance and decided to pay the tax. Well, technically, they're uninsured. So, and even under the Affordable Care Act, small businesses, because the premium prices were going up and they got out of the business, a lot of employees of small businesses became uninsured. So an unintended consequence of the Affordable Care Act, actually, yes, a large portion of previously uninsured people were now covered, which is good. That was the whole purpose. But unintentionally, unpredicted, a whole lot of people all of a sudden became uninsured because of it. So we don't talk about that very much, but I think it's really pretty interesting. Premiums increased on an average of 25% between 2008 and 2013 for the reason, or at least justified by the insurance companies, because so many more people who had insurance, who didn't have insurance before, there was a pent-up need, a pent-up demand for healthcare services. They weren't getting their hip done, they weren't getting their knee done, they weren't seeking treatment. So once they had coverage under the Affordable Care Act, they sought treatment. So, and when all those folks sought treatment, they happened to be a little sicker or less healthy than even the target younger population that we wanted to be shoveling premiums in. The cost of covering the people now accessing the service went up. So again, unintended consequences. Deductibles also increased between 2008 and 2013. On average, for an individual in 2008, it was $735 a year. In 2013, The average was $1,100. Well, $1,135. Just as an example of out-of-pockets going up. Private insurance in the HCA. I'm on slide 24. We got a lot of slides. Numerous employment-based plans lost their grandfather status. So all of a sudden, plans that have been around for years and years were no longer exempt from things and had to abide by the Affordable Care Act rules. That part of the self-insurance, I talked a little about 15 minutes ago about Hobby Lobby and faith-based organizations, they were grandfathered under ERISA and things like that for self-insurance. Affordable Care Act wiped some of that stuff out, and that's part of the reason why they got so upset. A flat fee was imposed on plans operating outside of ERISA. So if plans didn't want to participate, they got penalized. And then based on those penalties, it continued to drive premiums up. So not only were premiums going up because people were using the service more, but then all of a sudden, if they were grandfathered and there were other governmentally derived fees, all those fees were just passed on to the folks paying the premium. Insurance companies didn't suck it up and pay it out of their own profits. They passed those costs on. And that was, people didn't like that. Compliance requirements by health plans. I'm on slide 25. I have children, which you didn't meet him, but he was here a second ago. But I have to cover my kids up until they're 26 years old. That's a law. Have to do that. Used to not be that. Currently, coverage for pre-existing conditions exists. That all plans can't do experience rate. They can't do experience rating. So let's say my family, or I'm prone to heart disease. Experience rating for people like me that are prone to heart disease, my premium may be higher than my neighbor's. Well, can't do that anymore. Well, not only premiums, but there are some health plans that would say, we're not going to cover you because you're at really high risk for heart disease, and heart disease is really expensive. And if you have a heart attack, you're going to take way more money out of the pot than you put in, so we're not going to cover you. That's illegal. You can't do that anymore. But you used to be able to. So the effect of that, though, is that premiums then rise for everybody. So you got to have money to cover that heart attack. How are you going to get it? Higher premiums. Cover other compliance requirements by new health plans under ACAs, that there's preventative health services without cost sharing. So things like mammograms, that's a big thing. It's now a covered service. No dollar limits on benefits. Many plans historically had a dollar limit. We'll cover you only up to $3 million lifetime, or $1 million a year, or something like that. Well, that went away. Health plans now don't have dollar limits. So thought is like, if we can't cap, the insurance companies can't cap the expenditure by the budget for it, you got to be ready for all of it. Then what do you have to do? You have to charge higher premiums to cover the cost. So there's limits on out-of-pocket costs. So compliance said, well, why don't we just pass a law that will cap out-of-pocket costs from the employee and the employer at X dollar amount. I mean, this is why it's so complicated and frustrating for folks, is because you can pass a law to do that, but then the employers are like, okay, great, that's nice, but then the insurance companies are like, well, how can we manage the risk of having too many people take money out and there's not enough left in the pot to cover people? I don't know. I'm pretty neutral on it. I'm just trying to explain everybody's side of it. Likely effects is that premium will continue to rise, which is exactly what we've seen. So premiums will rise. There'll be less and less insurance companies just in the business. That's definitely going to happen. All right, I'm on slide number 27, the individual mandate. All legal residents must have minimal essential coverage or pay a penalty. That's the fee. If the individual mandate is the law saying you and I and everybody has to has to have a health benefit. If not, the government imposes a fee through a tax on the tax form. It's on the 1040. That's what the individual mandate is, and that is what a lot of folks are up in arms about. Also, the individual mandate has minimal essential coverage, meaning that there are 10 categories, and this is on Exhibit 6.2, that there's a list of things that by law a health plan has to cover, and that's the list. And that's under, not everybody agrees with that either. And then there's an exemption from individual shared responsibility. Households don't have to spend more than their 8% of their household income on health insurance. So that's the cap on out-of-pocket expenditures. Religious opposition to insurance, and there's certain other exemptions. Those are exemptions. So if you don't have to spend legally more than 8% of your income on health insurance, and you can say no to certain things for religious reasons. So slide 28, I talked about this too. Healthy individuals chose to pay the penalty of instead of buying health insurance, which the penalty was smaller than the premium amount that they would have been paid. And then health insurance and marketplace exchanges. There's a tiered system on the exchange. You have to be qualified, and qualified at a certain level. That's where bronze, silver, gold, platinum come in. You're qualified, and then there's tiers within there that varies the plans and their costs based on the premiums, the actuarial value. So over time, how much are they expected to pay out, premium costs, and the level of cost sharing. So how much the copays are, how much the deductibles are. So from bronze to platinum, it's rated based on how much. Like the platinum may be it usually is very, very little out-of-pocket costs above and beyond the premium, but the premium's really high. The bronze will be out-of-pocket or premium costs are really, really low. So someone really, really healthy, the premium will be really, really low because they don't expect to use it at all. But the deductible might be high, copays might be high, things like that. So it varies based on how you're going to use it. Maybe you as an employee have a choice based on that kind of stuff. All right, I'm going to take a break at, my dog came back, so now you can see her there. See, there she is. She's very needy. Get down. 4 paws on the floor. Stay down. That's it. Good girl. So, so where was I? Employer share responsibility. Oh, well, this is old news now, but employers, their shared responsibility was postponed until 2015. Because if you look way back in the 2008, 2009, go away. Or pay or play, where you either pay, well, you guys can read the slide, sorry, I'm distracted by my dog. All of the things apply to employers with 50 or more full-time people. Full-time was standardized at anyone who works 30 or more hours per week. That is basically full-time, where employers used to be 40 hours is full-time, and then if you wanted to qualify for health benefits, you had to work 40 hours a week. But that's now 30 hours a week. And then there's minimum value tests, where all plans being offered have to be at least at the bronze level. You don't, you just had to, and that's legally binding. And then the affordability test, that employees share the premium for a single plan must not exceed 9.5% of the household income. And then the expectation there is that the employer will cover a portion of it. So the 8% of the household income comes in there, and then that affects your taxes as well. And what they found, though, is that it leaves plenty of room to cost shift employees. Page 213 in the book has a really good list of ways in which insurance plans shift cost onto the employees. So the employer mandate, the penalties kick in around the 50 full-time equivalent. Well, basically, the employer mandate, if you don't do all this stuff, employers get taxed or fined. And that's, you have the individual mandate for you and I who say that we have to have service or have to have a benefit. There's also the employer mandate that if they don't do these kinds of things, they get fined as well. So now we're moving on to slide 31. Well, I'm going to break now, and then slide 31 through, I guess it's 72, I'll do in another installment. So I'll be back in a minute, or click on the next one to continue. Thanks.